Follow-up question to your UAB experience. Over the course of your 4 years there, you had a lot of success, as you mentioned, right? You had multiple 21 seasons or en route to that winning season all 4 years. Had a program and a career that kind of looked like it was in a particular you know direction that I'm sure you felt a lot
Yeah.
of confidence in and kind of certainty in that regard. We as leaders and as coaches, you teach a lot about dealing with adversity and kind of life changes as a part of coaching and games. So for you as a coach, you hit what would be probably your first kind of adversity moment, right? That your last season at UAB is on track to be another 21 season. We all experienced the life disruption that was COVID and cuts that season short. And then you, at that point, kind of have your first move where you and UAB agree to part ways. And I'm sure that given the direction, that was probably your first challenge in what was a rapidly, youngest upstart coach. So talk to me about that experience. And you already mentioned some of the lessons that you've learned and, the mistakes that you felt like you made, which we all do. What was kind of your, not only experience, but how did you grow and learn and overcome that? And who did you lean on? What were some of the things
Yeah.
in particular that you felt like you were able to take from that?
Yeah. So I think I told you, earlier that college was, one of the most, transformational points in my life. I think that probably the second part was after I got fired at UAB and COVID. And I think, there's a world of emotions that you go through when you get fired as a coach, especially because of how public it is. And especially because during, as you mentioned, there was good and bads of this, but during a time when like essentially the world had shut down. And also, yeah, it just being, kind of so unexpected. And as you mentioned, it was the first time really in my career, professional career, where I'd really faced like adversity. I had just been such a linear rise to success, you know what I mean, within the coaching industry, and had just good lucky break after lucky break, if you will. So yeah, it was, I think the first couple months were really hard, and I was still in coaching mode, meaning, like I was, thank God this didn't happen, but I chased a couple assistant coaching jobs really hard that looking back would have been horrible things if I would have got them just on how it panned out. Chased a couple head coaching jobs, almost got a head coaching job right after I got fired at UAB. 3 weeks later, I was a finalist for a job that I almost got, which I would have probably taken, but honestly, looking back, man, just such a blessing it didn't happen. And then I got a chance, after all that calmed down, I got a chance, really for about a year to be with my family, really reflect about my journey, who I was as a coach, what I wanted to prioritize in my life going forward, what I was passionate about. And I got to partake in some amazing kind of unique things, picked up some cool hobbies, joined like a leadership, a learning leadership circle with Ryan Hawk, who's kind of like the famous podcast, runs the Learning Leader. So I did one of his leadership circles for a year. I started a GA leadership academy for GAs around the country. I went to watch a bunch of practices, made a bunch of connections. My family and I went on some super cool vacations. Again, the world was shut down, so it made it a little bit easier, if you will, to kind of just be isolated with our family, and was really just, maybe more present than I ever had been for my family, during that time. Did such a better job of like physically taking care of myself ever since then. Started just, like a lot of people during COVID, working out more consistently, which I'd really let linger. Yeah, learning, doing some journaling and some reading. And, it was an amazing point time in my life where, I think it really looking back, was a big positive.
That's one of the lessons very hard to learn for so many people, right? A lot of the difficult things, the things that we you know would define as things that we wish we could control that don't go as we expect, and how a lot of times it opens the door and leads us to places that are growth moments, right? And things that we look back on. It's really cool to hear you describe that. And one of those things was you had a brief stint where you were an analyst for Pac-12 games.
Yeah.
Did love it, hate it? Was it
yeah,
you know?
it was again another cool experience. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It's you know, and working for the Pac-12 network, and I did an in-studio show, and I did a couple games, and you know, like bucket list kind of things, right? But like, you know, you, Phil, too, probably remember when we were growing up, you had like that, remember ESPN and Sports Center was just coming popular, and remember that show that all those people would try out to be a Sports Center anchor, that reality show, and man, how cool that was if you could ever do that. Like, I remember thinking of having all those thoughts as a kid, and to be able to experience that during COVID, but it's still nonetheless like worked 2 games, worked a studio show. That was a cool experience. Like, that was another thing that I'll be able to say, like, yeah, I got to do something really cool that kind of always wanted to try when I was younger.
That's funny, and you know, rest his soul, Bill Walton, one of the legends in the Pac-12 network, among many other career highlights and accolades. The double yes man himself. Did you ever interact with him during that brief stint?
Not,
you guys
not during that. No, because it was COVID, and so I mean, I was watching a lot of games and studying, and it's so funny because everyone, like, when I was getting advice, and I actually kind of hired a media consultant to help me a little bit in the beginning. And when I was getting advice, everyone's like, all right, don't watch Bill Walton because you can't be Bill Walton. You want to watch the other guys. Nobody can do what Bill Walton does. So I didn't during that time, but at Stanford the last couple of years, he did a handful of our games, and he just a remarkable person. And so I got to meet him there the last couple of years, and it's so amazing, you know. Kind of shocking. I didn't really realize Bill was sick. Like, I didn't realize he was, you know, I guess, you know, close to dying. And because I feel like I saw him a couple months ago, you know, doing a couple of our games, and said hi to him, and he knows everybody's name. It's one of his incredible life skills. Bill Walton knew everybody's name. Everybody in our program, I swear, he knew their name. And when he would see you at shoot around, he'd call you by your name. But it's so cool to see all the stories on social media of him, and truly how many people his life affected. And I think, man, you talk about leaving a legacy, and as we like to say, like, be legendary. Bill Walton's the definition of it. I mean, it's just, you get on Twitter and to hear like random people who had these like amazing encounters with Bill Walton, just really, really cool.
Yeah, he's definitely a legend, and you know, it's such an important part of, you know, the experience for college, and you know, the idea of announcers and you know, people that are memorable for kids, that sets the tone. I can remember seeing Dick Vitale at you know, our shoot around when I was a freshman at Fresno State in Madison Square Garden, and to this day, like, being awestruck of just like, is this really happening right now? Is, you know, Dick Vitale talking to Coach Tarkanian while I'm out here shooting around about a game that I'm playing in Madison Square Garden, and literally just like, I'm in a dream. Like, this can't, you know, those types of things. And Bill Walton, you know, I never got to meet him. I got to watch his kids play a lot over at Jesuit in their tournaments, and I know he was there, but as iconic of an individual as there is, and his unique personality. Really cool about the names too. That is a skill. So then, you know, that kind of touches on, you end up in the Pac-12. You move your family back to the West Coast, first time in a long time, and you just spent you know, multiple years there, reconnecting with an old, you know, coach and an old teammate in Jesse Pruitt, mentioned before, and now that kind of is your last gig. So how did that kind of come to be? And you know, also you can touch on your success in recruiting one of the you know, local Sacramento products. You know, Peja Stojakovic, legendary King. His son is you know, a Stanford Cardinal, thanks to you. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, I think when I was out of coaching and then deciding the next hiring cycle, okay, hey, there's going to be some opportunities. For me, it was really about working for the right person. I think at my age and what I've gone through, being an assistant coach, it was all about who I worked for and my quality of life, and working for someone who respected me, but who would allow me to control my time to some degree, which is very rare, as assistant coach. And had a few opportunities at different schools, but to go back to work for Coach, who I've said this to everybody, and if anybody watched his last press conference in Vegas after his last game against Washington State, I mean, he was the definition of servant leadership. And of the 360 plus Division I basketball coaches in the country, Jared Haas is number one in the country in terms of how he treats his staff, the freedom he gives his staff, the flexibility, and in terms of a person you would want to work for. And at my age, after being a head coach and having 3 kids and wanting to be a part of their lives, all those things were incredibly important to me. And have some history with Stanford. Obviously, it's in California, but my brother-in-law went there. My stepsister went to Stanford. Just knowing how highly regarded it is as an academic institution, all those things played, and it was a no-brainer for me to go back to California with my family, really for the first time. For the first time since I left in 2005 after Davis. But it was an awesome